So today we're going to talk about Tool by Peter Sotos. This is a book recommended by at Big Hole on Instagram, and this book is about this book takes place from the first person perspective of a rapist, murderer, pedophile. This is definitely within the transgressive field. So mind you, if you're not really into these themes and topics, this is not the video for you. Not saying I'm promoting these ideas, obviously, but I always feel like literature is, if we don't have any other place to explore these ideas, literature is the best and safest place to first look at them at a first-hand perspective. It's best to experience these monsters in the literary where it's safe and nobody's getting hurt than what's actually happening out there in the real world. So, it's a very short story. Peter Sotos is very unknown. I have the PDF down in the description. I didn't scan it, somebody else did, but his books are so expensive right now. They go for hundreds of dollars just for like a book that's like 100 pages long, like this one. So I'd recommend the download unless you're like a big fan of him. But basically what this book goes, it's a mishmash, and it's not the strongest narrative. The overall plot is about a guy who rapes and murders a young girl and gets sent to prison. But it's more about his ideologies, almost like more journal entry than actual novel, where the character explores his ideas of racism, sexism, homophobia, and everything. So the first segment is about attacking a little girl and about his thoughts with women and just very misogynistic ideologies he has about women. The next chapter is about him attacking a black hooker, and it's funny how like this guy's such a monster and everything, but he makes a big emphasis on that this person is black and all the racism that is attributed to that as well. And then he has a portion in the book where he talks about a gay man, which he doesn't call gay, but he calls other apt names for it. But it's interesting because he's almost, even though he kills him, he's almost a bit softer with him and more willing to know his background. While the background for the woman characters is more like, oh, you're just a slut. I bet your dad did all this stuff to you. It's better than anything else you're gonna get in life. This one, it's a bit more empathetic in a weird way, even though it's still pretty bad. The major tenet of Sotos is one, his violent writing. I'm not sure you already gleaned from this, but also the amateurness of his writing. This is all from a very first-person perspective. I guess you can say modernism, stream of consciousness, to a large degree, because he'll talk to characters and he'll think about characters, but you'll never hear the other characters' dialogue or input or anything like that. Except for one part with the police officer in the end. And it's very amateurish in the sense that it's almost like something you would write in high school, sans the disturbing aspect of it, where it's like, this is the kind of person you are, this is how you dare to do this. It's almost like a breakup letter. Like, how could you be this cold to me? I did everything to you, for you, and you just left me that. It's kind of like that kind of language throughout the novel, but for the subject matter and what he's trying to convey, it works well, and that it just really does a great job of, by putting that raw violence on the page, and it's just unending and you just can't escape from it. It's claustrophobic in that sense. It's almost like when people do a painting and instead of doing really fine-tuned brushes and over, they just do globs of paint and just make it all sketchy, and or in manga where they make the characters all sketchy when they're enraged. So it's like that kind of writing. It's not very literary, not very refined, but effective for what he's trying to do within it as well. Now this is an interesting one, because sometimes with transgressive works, there's a tendency for the author to just try to be as edgelordy as possible. And through that edgelord, it's just kind of like, oh man, you're just trying too hard, or like you kind of ran out of steam early on in the novel and the other stuff is not as horrible. And while Sotos is trying to do that, there's also like, you can sense an underlying frustration that maybe the author is trying to express in this as well. And because of that, the elements of the disturbing and the elements of where he is prone to go to don't really run out, and they stay consistent throughout the book. So it's pretty much just as horrible at the beginning of the book as it is towards the end of the book. So it does feel like Soto's trying to push the bounds of transgressive literature, but there's also something really innate in him that he enjoys. So it's not just something he's trying to, like, oh, let's just make an edgy book as possible. There's a sense of sexual satisfaction or curiosity within this as well. And to a large degree, I appreciate what he does, because he talks about subjects that I don't think you can really do in the graphic detail that he does in other mediums. For example, he has a whole section on child pornography and describing it, and these intricate details and his views on pornography. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like Saad because, well, Saad, you can tell sometimes that it's not so much the sexual act itself that turns him on, but it's more the transgressive nature of the act. When he talks about that, where he says a choice word for gay people, but that how others they get turned on by the young boy's body in the pornography and everything, but for him it's not about that. It's more about just how much it hurts the individual. So for him, he is adverse to more like newborn stuff, like Siberian film stuff and everything, and he likes it more when they have more cognition because that's where he gets the satisfaction out of. Much like Saad, when a lot of stuff like the gross butt stuff and fart stuff he does with people, it's not so much that turns him on, you get the sense, but more that it grosses up the other person, or the homophobic the homosexual aspects in Saad. It's not so much that the proclivity towards other men, it goes more against the church and the cultural norms at the time. I'm sure Saad was gay or bi as well, but you get more of that sense from it than the actual like, oh man body is cool. So it's really interesting to see these transgressive ideologies just pushed to such an extreme and just laid so barely on the page without really consideration for what the reader would think. And this has got Sotos in a lot of hot water. He had a magazine called Pure, which you see references in there, that the second volume had child pornography on it, and he did go to jail for it, so good job, buddy. But it's almost like avant-garde music, where when you have songs like 4333, which is 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, it really pushes the boundaries of what music can do. And what this definitely pushes what's acceptable and what can be shown in literature. Let me provide you an alternate perspective. I was talking to Laney today, and I asked him, like, when did censoring become looser in fiction? Because I forgot the author, but I think it was Norman Mailer. Maybe I was wrong about that. But in his book about World War II, he kept writing the word fudge, F-U-G, instead of fuck, because fuck was inappropriate. But and I guess there's a big lawsuit with Random House. One of the main books, I forgot the other one, but one of the main books that opened up the censor laws on literature was Ulysses, James Joyce Ulysses. Probably because the masturbation scene, but because Ulysses, censorship really loosened on literature. So while you might look at this smut, like, what's the point of this? Is it just to push the angles, just be edgy? Hey, could you say the same thing about Ulysses? Even though Ulysses had much better writing in it, and it was a much better plot. But there is something to be said, and to be able to view this ideology and be able to have it on the page. I'm not saying it should become popular. I'm not saying it should be at Barnes and Nobles or your local library. That'd be an insane library. But, there should be an avenue for this literature to exist as well. Also, from a real perspective, it's kind of like studying racism. It's kind of like Umberto Eco. When you have these racist views and these racist ideologies, it's better not to burn them. I heard some liberal people, unfortunately, were burning racist documents, but it's better to have them and to study them so we know what the racist playbook looks like. It's kind of like when in Christian libraries they had pagan literature and they studied pagan literature. It's like, why would they study pagan literature? Well, maybe some facts of it. So, one, human curiosity, human intellectualism, but also to understand pagan literature and break it down and, profess that Christ is the true word. I don't know how I said that word in that review, but just like the pedophilia, I don't agree with that notion either. But yeah, so it's really interesting to view this one. And it's also interesting because Sotos almost kind of does play a thing where he attacks everybody, but it's like, okay, you attack everybody, but then like you put an emphasis on black people, so it's almost like I hate everybody equally, but you don't, because you don't focus on the whiteness of the prostitute's body or the young girl's body. So I thought that was interesting. The really interesting part too is at the end of this novel, it's a letter to the mom and how the mom would feel about the murder. And I thought it was going to be a situation like, oh yeah, I did all this stuff to your daughter. How does that make you feel? And like kind of like what he does with the other characters. However, by the end of it, I was like, wait a minute, this was really heartfelt, and this actually addressed some real big issues. It wasn't like from a skeevy, pervy nature, but it's to the fact like, you raised this child, you put so much effort into this. And sometimes it's not so much the emotional loss, but the loss of meaning in your life that you don't have that meaning to raise this child anymore, and I offer my deepest condolences and hope you do better in life. And it's like, wait, what? That's a really heartfelt sentiment. This book with all this depravity and messed up stuff in it, and has this really great take on what it must mean for a mother to have her daughter murdered and expecting to find her and all the stress of not being able to see them, much like the movie Prisoners. And it was kind of shocking to see this at the end of it. I also like the part with the police officer and his recollections. Somebody's asking like, "Hey man, you get turned on by all this dirty stuff? How do you masturbate and everything?" And the police officer just keeps going through these traumas that he's seen and these horrible things. And it's like, man, it's just so screwed up out there. I see so much screwed up stuff. People do so much screwed up stuff, and they just have to be the bearer of it. It's like they're the barrier between all this fucked up stuff and normal society. And there's a point he makes like, man, you must have all the best child porn and all the best murder stuff and everything. And I like how he doesn't portray the police officer as a skeeve, but he's kind of like, yeah, man, after we view all this messed up stuff, it's just me dealing with this. Like, we keep this hidden, but like, I still have to see it. And it just sucks for being a police officer to have that, even if it's not the norm, but like that's still stuff that happens. Like even it says like, even if you choose this part of life, it's pretty comfortable when you don't have to deal with it because it's not happening all the time. But God, when it happens, it's just such a traumatic thing. So in these 50 pages, which is actually more like 100 because it's double-sided, you get a very blunt, unfiltered view of Soto's imagination in here. And I'm really happy that it's out there. I'm going to look more into his other works as well. I heard this is the most literary, but guys, this is not a very narrative-driven novel or very literary. It's cool that it's all in first person, but like, there's better novels that do that. This is just more like a blunt, uncompromising, we're not going to be PC about this, here's all my fucked up opinions on the page. And if you're interested in stuff like that, I definitely recommend it. I enjoyed it. I like weird stuff like that, but even though I don't hold these views, don't cancel me. But yeah, Peter Sotos' Tool, I recommend it if you're a perv.